Um, Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, so, as Tony mentioned, my name is Aashiq, and I'm from MYOB. Before I begin, I'd just like to tell you guys about our Future Makers Academy that we have at MYOB. It's about growing students and teaching them values around becoming great problem solvers and writing software to solve those problems. You guys can help yourselves to those. And tomorrow, Mark's actually giving a talk uh, about the Future Makers Academy, what they get up to, and what you can actually learn at MYOB by joining the Future Makers Academy. So, I'm sure some of you are wondering, who is this guy, right? I know when I go for a talk, I usually spend the first minute or two Googling the person that's speaking to find out a bit more about them, where they've been and so forth. So I thought that it'll only be fair if I share a little bit about myself. So, as I mentioned a few seconds ago, my name is Aashiq Durga. I recently moved to New Zealand to join MYOB. And what I do at MYOB is I like to think of it as problem solving. And sometimes I have to solve these problems by writing code in a collaborative manner with the awesome people at MYOB. Among this, I also enjoy going out, meeting people, having a few drinks. Beer is my favorite thing. Passionate about music and business, and hopefully use the skills that I have to change the world a little bit at a time, hopefully for the good. So that's me. Any questions about that? Cool. So today, my purpose is to talk to you about having a voice. What does this mean, and how do some people just do it? Is what they're doing actually right? How come some people actually can be so influential when they walk into a room and they start talking about something and suddenly everybody's drawn to what they're saying? Why is it so natural to some of us and not to the rest of us? And what does this actually mean when you say having a voice? You see, my understanding and what I've learned in my journey, I felt that having a voice is actually more about the understanding part than the talking part. Because when we understand what's actually happening in the situation that we're in, we can start contributing in a positive manner and expressing our intentions in the best way possible, and hence add value to the situation. I'm going to tell you a bit of a story how I kind of realized this. It was pretty much earlier in my life. I was heavily involved in music and DJing and music production and so forth. I had two cousins that were influential to me getting involved in music, and I used to visit them during the holidays once in a while because they lived like 600 kilometers away from me. And I'd get there and they'd be doing their thing, mixing music, making tracks, playing with the decks and whatever not. And this was like, I really wanted to do this. It excited me so much. But every time I got in a room where they were busy doing their thing, I never got involved. I'd be the one that would stand there and I'd observe and I'd look what's happening. And they'd share their music with me, they share their software with me, and I'd take it and I'd go home and play around with it in my own spare time. And over the years, this happened over and over again, and until one day, my cousins actually came to visit me, and one of my cousins was like, "Hey, would you like to hear my new mix?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." He puts it on, I listen, and I'm like, wow, wait a second, that actually sounds kind of familiar. I actually did something kind of similar. And he was like, "What do you mean you did something kind of similar? I never knew that you make music too." And I was like, "Yeah, I actually do this in my spare time, So it's like, "Okay, sweet, let me listen to it." So we went up to my room, fired up my PC, good old Windows XP Pentium 4 with not so legal software at the time. Ironic because I actually develop software for a living now and I should only use pirated software. But that's a story for another day, right? So we get there, I put this on and he's like, "Wow, dude, this is actually quite amazing." I was like, "Yeah, it's something I just came up with." And he was like, "Well, wait a minute, what if you try this? What if you quantize that?" I was like, "What's quantize?" He explains to me what's quantize. And I was like, "Okay, but what if we splice this?" And he's like, "How do you splice?" And suddenly we found ourselves in a situation where we were both collaboratively working on a new mix, sharing our ideas. It was at that moment that I realized, whoa, we just created a learning opportunity. I got to share what I know. He taught me what he knew, and we've been adding value to creating something brand new that's actually going to make people dance, enjoy, or whatever the case may be, you know. And here's the thing that a lot of people struggle with is actually stepping out of their comfort zone, speaking to other people about what you know, and understanding the value that you can add to them. And this phenomena or thing that we feel is actually known as imposter syndrome. Has anybody heard about imposter syndrome? No, some people have. Okay, cool. So, as per the definition on Wikipedia, imposter syndrome is a phenomenon, it's a psychological pattern whereby an individual doesn't acknowledge their accomplishments. You have this internalized fear that somebody is going to expose you as a fraud in that situation. Think back to a time where you may have felt that. Have you ever felt where you were in a situation and you heard somebody speak and you heard them say something that never quite sounded right, and you might have known better, but you felt too afraid to actually put yourself out there and say, actually, this is what it is, because you were afraid of being seen as the person that's actually wrong, right? I mean, that happens to us on a daily basis. It can happen when you enter a new environment. It can happen even here at uni when you meet new people. It happens all the time in the workplace when we're trying to share ideas and collaborate. Some people actually feel this when they are in relationships. So again, why do we get this? We get this because we have a fear that we are not accountable for our competency, and we are afraid that those around us always know more than what we actually know. And we never realize that not everybody knows everything about everything. And the little that we know about the subject matter at that point in time is something that we can share and educate them, and in turn share information with those around us and actually collaborate in a positive way to solve problems at hand, or actually speak out about what we know. And if we don't do this, everybody's going to remain in their silos, not share ideas, and actually not get anywhere and learn new things in the process, right? So what can we do when you feel this? So generally, the first thing you need to do is take a deep breath and calm down, right? Secondly, look at the people around you and stop comparing yourself to them. Because the moment you stop comparing yourself to those around you and become confident about your knowledge and your abilities, you feel much better about yourself and really realize what you've accomplished in life. And thirdly, if you've been through all of this and you're kind of realizing, whoa, this is imposter syndrome that I'm feeling right now, take a step back and say to yourself, this is imposter syndrome. And suddenly everything starts feeling much better and your mind is much clearer and you just get more comfortable with whatever you are doing at that point in time, right? So when I started this talk, I said that it's actually understanding that's the important part in communicating. How many times have you guys been in a conversation where you're talking, somebody else is talking, but you're just not getting anywhere? Things are getting lost in translation. We're not understanding what's happening. We're not realizing the value that we're adding to this conversation, or we're not understanding the needs that each of us actually want, or the needs that we need, right? So the thing is that what we need to realize is when we're communicating, who do we communicate to? We communicate to people, right? And people are different. People are complex. You know, I got into software a few years ago and I thought that I was going to be sitting behind a computer, writing code the whole day and not interacting with anybody at any point in time. And I thought, wow, my life's going to be great. So I don't need to deal with people. And let me tell you, I was wrong. You know, at that moment I realized that, well, the things that we are doing, we're actually doing it for other people, right? I mean, engineers build things. And why do we build things? We don't build it so we can keep it on a pedestal and look at it so it's pretty. We want people to actually use it, and we want to add value to their lives, right? And how do we know that we're building the right thing for them? How do we know that this time and effort that we're spending on what we are doing is actually adding value to them? We've got to communicate to them. We've got to ask them, hey, do you like this chair in yellow? Do you like this table in white? And you've got to get that feedback from them. And you've got to understand, why don't they like this chair in yellow? Or why do they like this chair in yellow? You know, and there's actually a science behind it of what people require and what we need and what we understand and the manner in which we say things. Because a lot of the time it's not what we say, but rather how we say it to those individuals involved in the communication. And that brings me to my next point, which is NVC, non-violent communication. So non-violent communication stems from the fact that most conflicts happen due to miscommunication of human needs. As human beings, we all have needs. Everything we do is in need of something. This happens when we use language to manipulate the situation and induce some sort of fear, guilt, or shame in each another. I mean, we've all been in those conversations where it gets so heated up that sometimes it actually becomes personal when it's just about work or about an idea or a choice to make, you know? Do we ever take the time out to sit back and think, hey, why do you think it should be this way? How many of us really understand the needs of the next person when we're trying to collaborate with them or listen to them or just generally come to a good conclusion? A lot of us make this mistake on a daily basis, from working environments to dealing with children sometimes, to dealing with our friends. I mean, we have fallouts and arguments because we're not understanding each other's needs. And these are very violent sort of behaviors that we can have in these situations. So NVC basically stems on four main sort of concepts, and that's observe, feel, need, and request. You see, human connection is key to personal and career success, because if us as human beings can't express our intentions of good, we can be perceived as bad, even though we really intend to do our best in that situation. And observation is something that we need to step back and look at and say, the facts of what we are seeing and hearing or touching are distinct from our evaluation of the situation. We've got to look objectively at what's happening and evaluate without criticism, but rather keep in mind the time and the context of what happened. Does that make sense? So at this time, you did this, which caused that to happen. By explaining that situation to somebody and observing that this happened under certain constraints, we can be much more clear about what went wrong at that time. The second thing we do is understand the feelings. So how does it make you feel when something happens? You know, and there's many different ways to do this. Describing how you feel and opening up your emotions and becoming vulnerable is something that a lot of us battle with. I mean, nobody goes out there and says, you know what, I don't like this because it makes me feel this way. A lot of people just keep quiet, bottle it in them, and walk away and do whatever that situation sort of unfolded to, and never really express how they feel. And by doing that, you're not actually adding any value or communicating in positive ways and improving the situation. You need to understand how the next person feels and also express how you feel. And once we understand how people feel, we can start asking about their needs and realizing that certain people need things for certain reasons, right? I mean, you need to know why I am doing this, or I need to know why you are doing that. Those are things that we need to talk to each other about, and most of the time that requires compromise, because what you may need might be in direct conflict with what I may need. And in that moment in time, we need to come to a realization and come to a compromise about that, right? And the last thing that NVC really talks to us about is request. So request is an interesting one because a request is very different from a demand. When you request something, you request it with the understanding that no is a valid answer. I may request you to do something. I am not demanding you to do something. It's a very profound thing, because if somebody does reply to you with a no to your request, you can step back and ask the question, why is it no? And that could be because they don't feel good about that particular thing at that moment in time under those constraints, right? And I think that creates a really good way for us to communicate to each other in a way which we add value and non-violently, as NVC says. So I don't know how many of you have ever been in situations where you felt yourself being spoken to violently, maybe even abusively. How did that make you feel? Yes, no? Taish? Small. And have you expressed that to the people around you about the way that you felt at that point in time? Why? Did you feel that you were wrong? Did you have imposter syndrome at that time? So this happens when people are overly confident or have very confident personalities, and they don't do it with that intention. And I believe it's us that have the knowledge about how we should communicate or how we can communicate for a better outcome. We need to educate those around us about this and actually ask them the questions about why are they saying these things? Why are they expressing themselves in this way? Is it truly their intent to make me feel this way? I'm sure nobody wakes up in the morning, gets out of bed and be like, I'm going to be an asshole today. I mean, we don't do that, right? We're humans, we have feelings, we have emotions. I mean, some of our basic needs are empathy. We need to put our shoes in the selves of those around us to understand how they feel, so we can actually communicate and react to whatever is happening in that situation. And that's why I thought that imposter syndrome and NVC kind of go well together and relate to having a voice, because at the end of the day, having a voice is not so much about talking, but rather about listening and understanding rather than just replying to that situation. And I promise you that when you understand what somebody's saying and you start replying to them in a more human-like, non-violent manner, they will understand you much better, and you'll have a much more fruitful conversation. You'll get your message across, and you'll probably do something amazing. Whether it was like me making a mix with my cousin at the time, which had nothing to do with anything important. It was truly because we both found a way to communicate and add value to the situation that we were in. Or on a daily basis, when you're working with somebody and you're sharing your ideas and you're battling to express your views, you should take a moment, step back, and understand, how am I feeling? What am I saying? Are they understanding me? Am I understanding them? And that way, hopefully, we can all start having a voice. So that's kind of all that I had about this topic. I wanted to keep it short and sweet, precise to the meaning. Does anybody have any questions about this? No questions? We good? Okay, awesome. That was 20 minutes on the dot, I think. Sweet. Thank you guys for listening to me. Got one meme. There we go. And yeah, I hope you all can go out there, have a voice, and start teaching people about communicating in a non-violent manner and spreading the word about this. Just a reminder to help yourselves to our MYOB sign-up cards for the Future Makers Academy. It's something really awesome that's happening at MYOB. And tomorrow, Mark will be giving a talk, I forgot the details of where, about the Future Makers Academy and what he does at WG44. So be sure to catch him there tomorrow between 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. We'll be talking about Future Makers Academy and MYOB. So yeah, thank you.